the voice of Utah. AM 630 K-Talk.
K-Talk.com.
Number one for the most live, local, two-way talk.
We have a guest on our show today. He is G.J. Reynolds. Now, he is going to talk about success in business despite the difficulty to maneuver laws and regulations. He is very, he has a definition of success. He says success is peace of mind that can be obtained only from the self-satisfaction of knowing that I have made the effort to do the very best of which I am capable. Now, he learned this from, former basketball coach John Wooden. But the point is it's hard to be successful when the government's hammering us. But G's going to tell us what's going on. Welcome to the show, G.
Well, thanks for having me, and I've been listening to the show all morning, and, man, you're giving a lot of good facts on education, what's happening behind the scenes, how things have led up to where we're at today. And, like you said, there's some scary numbers there, and we better hold on as a society.
Well, and people don't like hammering those numbers. I even have my own family members who really don't want me to, talk to them about what's going on. They'd rather just ignore the fact that these things are going on and, just hope things get better. But things aren't going to get better with hope.
Correct. The only way things are going to change is that people have to take a stance and say, we're sick and tired of enough's enough. However, I believe the pain has to get a little bit worse for people to truly wake up and say, hey, what happened here? And unfortunately, that may be too late. So, what can we do?
Well, I firmly believe, G, that the salvation for America is going to come from Main Street. It's going to come from normal, everyday American people who have an idea, a concept that they want to share with others, and we need to start supporting local businesses. That's what Buy Back America is about. It's about, protecting Main Street when Wall Street and the government's trying to hammer down on them. So, for people out there with a good concept or a good product, they're looking to start a business, they're unemployed, anyone who wants to, lower their taxes, is this the time? Are they able to make those types of moves in an economy like this?
Most definitely. And what I have found is when there's times of tough economic strife, that is the best time to actually start a business because there's opportunity there. And even though there's a lot of negativity, and you gave some astounding numbers, and they're scary, however, now's the time to start a business because people are looking for other alternatives. And even if you have a regular job, what do you do to make up for the amount of money that is happening with inflation? The cost of gas is going up, home prices. Everything is going up, and up. How do you maintain the continued level of living standard? And to me, the only way is through, being an entrepreneur and having a home-based business. And obviously, whether you have a home-based business or a regular business, those are the best tax deductions that we are still allowed underneath the law. So that's the best way, in my opinion, to start right now.
Well, and a lot of people look at it. It's hard to get financing. It's hard to get a location. Landlords are being tighter, even though their buildings are empty. Is home-based business the way to start a business without trying to look at the expense of a location, utilities, triple net lease? Which would be the best way to start? Do you recommend permanent location business or do you recommend home-based business?
Well, I believe it depends on the type of business it is, first of all. As far as having a home-based business, what's great about that is that now you can write off a portion of the usable expenses that you already have. So you've actually given yourself a pay raise in an essence. And then the other component is that you're minimizing your initial expenses. And, a lot of great businesses have started in the basement or in the garage, and they've gone on to become, major corporations. The key is when you're starting a business is keep your costs down. So, until you get your revenue stream up, we want to make sure that your revenue is coming in before you really spend on a lot of money. And then with all the different things that are going out there as far as the cost of buildings and so forth, you want to keep your costs down. Now, on the flip side, because there is so much real estate available, I mean, I'm looking at 5 businesses, 5 buildings right now, brand new, very nice, up part of town, and they've been empty from day one. And I guarantee if somebody wanted to go and say, hey, I want to cut a deal here, there are deals to be cut, especially when you're looking at some of those communities that you just talked about with all the vacancy rate. The owners want them filled.
Well, yeah, it don't do them any good sitting there empty. Now, we didn't bring you on the show just because you're some guy living somewhere in America who likes to talk business. You're actually an expert in the field. You've actually written a book. Why don't you give a little background on yourself so the callers understand? I just didn't bring in like a cousin from somewhere back east to help me sound good.
Come on, Cousin Tim. Cousin Candace.
There you go.
Well, my background is I'm a former military sergeant in the U.S. military, and I have I'm a lead follower and get the heck out of the way mentality. So I understand the military side of things. I got out and got in the corporate world, and I really actually became disillusioned with the corporate world because I was this up-and-coming young entrepreneur, corporate person that became an executive. And one of the challenges that happened is I went through 3 different organization reshuffles, cuts in the with the businesses, and I realized at some point this is going to be me. I was fortunate to survive all the different transitions. However, I realized I'm really not in control of where I'm going in my own future. So in 1991, I ventured out, became an entrepreneur, and my first venture was in real estate in a good market, and I made less money than I spent, which is a bad thing. Sounds like our government.
Yeah, that really sounds like the government.
So I went back and worked. I still had the belief that I could be in control of where I was going, and I had that drive. And I went and worked for a small entrepreneurial company and saw what they did right, saw what they did wrong, and then me and another gentleman started our own company. And from that point on, I've had different businesses, anywhere from small companies to $100 million companies. And the key is running lean, mean, and being smart in growth and being smart with the expenses, and also creating opportunities in when there's an opportunity within a market.
Well, and I, traveling around and talking to a lot of businesses, that's what I do. I saw a lot of mistakes coming in the mid and early 2000s where businesses were thinking everything in the economy was going to be great forever, so they started expanding. They started buying these really large offices, and, the owners got, I hate to say it, but a little greedy, and they wanted a big, 30 by 40 office for themselves and huge warehouse space. And now, it's like the steel business. Take that for example. So much constructions, everything was going on that businesses in the steel industry were turning away customers because everybody was begging for their products. And now you can't go out and sell anything in the steel or construction industry because no business is going on. So those who really overexpanded, who thought their business was going to grow and grow and grow, now have these huge facilities you see shutting down across the United States. So growth is important, but you have to do it wisely. You have to make sure your income stream's a pretty secure income stream before you start investing in properties and warehouses. Sometimes running lean and mean, like you said, is the way to approach even, personal life and business.
Most definitely. And, you hit on a point, the way they got greedy and then, and the ego started kicking in. And then the other component is I see this happen with a lot of entrepreneurs and small business owners, is that they believe the life cycle is going to go forever. And most things have a life cycle. If you were in the typewriter business.
G, can you hold the life cycle? We got a 2-minute break real quick. We'll get back with that, okay?
Sure.
We'll be right back after this break with more G. Reynolds.
I got my mind set on you. I got my mind set on you.
I have my mind set on a lot of things, but I am able to discuss and listen to other ways to go about it. Our guest is G. Reynolds today. We're talking business regulations, that it still is a good time. You can be successful. You were just talking about, I brought up a point about greed, G.
Right. Well, you were talking about, they were getting bigger real estate, bigger warehouses, more. And then what happens is that there's a life cycle, and the life cycle has a time frame, and it could be years and years, or it could be, a short period of time. And to give an example, if you were selling typewriters nowadays, you'd be in a tough situation. If you're selling, VHS and tape decks, you'd be, in a world of hurt. So everything has a life cycle, some longer than others. And one of the things that I've seen in, with small businesses and, even some of the big, is they thought the life cycle was going to go on and on and on, and it typically will not. And so when that happens, what do you do? So as a small business, you've got to be smart in seeing the life cycles and the trends that are happening. Another thing that's happening is, you're providing a show of information that, in my opinion, is key to know about what's going on truly in the world and what's going on behind the scenes, because indirectly and directly it will affect your business.
Well, and that's true, and that's what a lot of people don't realize is there's a big difference between having a home-based business and having an actual location-based business on the different types of regulations that are going to be involved with both scenarios. And the expenses could go up and shut down. What is meant as a home-based business could be jeopardized if you try and go, to location-based. Now, there was this great company in Utah that was selling great key items on the Internet from their home in a clothing industry. Well, they thought, we're doing so good. In 2005, they opened up 9 locations. They're all closed down now. These people went bankrupt. What would have been a great Internet business, great home-based business, they thought would translate over to a great storefront business, and it didn't work for them.
Well, and that's not uncommon. But also, on the other side of it, Novell began with the superset in a garage. And so I think, G, what would be the key in knowing and deciding what should stay the home business and what could actually grow outward into an actual brick and mortar place?
Well, those are great examples that you just gave, and that's just one of many, many. So what's the answer is obviously you've got to look at the pros and cons of moving forward, outside of a home. One of the things that I would recommend personally is before you take on that kind of liability and expense is that are you able to align yourself with companies that are doing that for, a living and they're masters at it. And one is they can keep costs down. The other thing is you're paying them for the usage. If you're using it, you're paying for it. If you're not using it, you're not paying for it. So those are some things that I would look at as an entrepreneur is what can I do to be successful in my core business, and what kind of alliances can I reach out to and create, a win-win scenario.
Well, and that's true. And a lot of situations are changing in America. I talk about it all the time. We're a little bit off track here, and it's not a very, business-friendly environment out there right now. The banks got bailouts. Businesses aren't getting the money. Is there anything we can do to get us back on track?
Well, you said a key component is that the people have to, it's the changes that are going to happen within the United States of America has to come from the people. And one of the things that, in my opinion, that has to happen, we got to get back to the grassroots. One of the great things that made our country is that we had small businesses and we had many entrepreneurs. We had little shops on the corner. We had, small pockets of businesses, and they were all entrepreneurial-based businesses. And a lot of them, they lived above their business, and they had the business downstairs. So I believe we have to get back to the grassroots. The other component is we're talking about bailouts. We're talking about extending the the debt ceiling. I mean, every channel you can turn to now, they're talking about it. Where do we cut and how much do we expend? And the one thing that I would say is let's get back to producing revenue. If we produce more revenue within the country, that's going to help offset some of the debt. And then we also get smart about cutting expenses from the government all the way down to your own personal business. And those are key things I see that have to happen. So I believe we have to get back to grassroots entrepreneurism and give incentives for those people to be successful. And then let's reward everybody who does that so that we bring back the country to where we know it should be.
Well, and I agree with you hugely on that part. And it's really, there's been this mentality for the last little while in Washington where they say, we really don't need to produce everything here. Let's look to other nations to supply the widgets because, we want more executives and we want more, of the CEOs. We don't want a manufacturing force out there. We don't want to be producers. That's not true. Nations cannot survive if we don't produce. And when are they going to get the picture? And when are we as Americans going to recognize every time we open up our wallet, we validate the importing and the exporting of our jobs in America on a daily basis? It's really scary to me that, we say it's okay not to produce every time we purchase these widgets from other countries, and in the meantime, we're destroying Main Street.
Most definitely, and one of the things is there has to be a major shift. Right now, I mean, I saw some of the congressmen on some of these shows, that I've watched in the last couple of days, and you can tell they're all very nervous about what's going on. And they're all afraid to make that choice or make that shift or be leading the shift, which they know has to happen. However, if they make that choice, they're afraid of being voted out of, Congress or, all a series of things that happen. And then, what is the chaos that may happen from that shift? So there's such a big fear going on right now at our highest levels, which also creates the fear within the people. And there's that unknown. And one thing that, you were asking me, one of the things that I did that brought me on the show is I recently wrote a book, just came out this week, called The Playful and Powerful Warrior Within You. And it's really about dealing with some of these components of fear and ego and what do I do and how do I do it, because I found myself as an entrepreneur in 2001 depressed and suicide because a business ended. And the business ended not because of my doing, because it had a cycle and it ended, and I couldn't get anything going. And so the last 10 years, I wrote in the book what worked for me and how to work through that. The key component is also that book touches upon some of the things that both Congress is dealing with and the average person and your listeners, and how to work through that. And they can get that book at powerfulwarrior.com, and I know that sounds like a plug, and it is. However, I believe, I know that most people are dealing with those things, which comes back to how does it affect their business? And if you can work through your own stuff and look within and be the playful and powerful warrior, you can be the playful and powerful warrior entrepreneur, which is in my next book, by the way.
Well, that's good, and I agree with you. If you look back to the core values this country was started on, we were a very successful merchant country before we separated from England. We put the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence in place to protect what we had established already as a nation that could create and build. Today, most politicians, I think, understand the fact that small business is the key to America. It employs 60 to 80% of the people. And in allowing some of these big global companies to come in and they're devouring Main Street and centralizing all the purchasing power in these big box stores, we are in a sense, essentially destroying our own, cookie basket. We're taking away from our future because you get rid of 15 businesses that all hire 5 to 15 people and replace it with a huge box store that pays, less money or can do it more efficiently. We're creating a problem in this country. do you agree? Would you say that our roots are small business in America?
Most definitely, Tim. I mean, that's the key, and that's where we got to get back to. And let's say in your example, 15 businesses close up. All right, how many had employees, and how many employees? And now what do? All right, are they going to find other jobs? Right now, you got almost a 10% unemployment rate. You got 13.5 million people, out of work, and they're looking for work, and the jobs aren't there in a lot of these communities. I mean, some of the communities you spoke about earlier, 50% of the people are gone. So what do you do? And now they go to and collect unemployment, which is also now a burden to the tax, the tax burden, and it's, increasing the debt. So it's creating a whole nother problem that most people are failing to address. So the best way is get back to the grassroots and creating, small entrepreneurial type jobs and businesses.
Well, and the government's not going to be able to do that. People need to recognize the government don't create business. And from the earlier part of this show, we recognize the only thing they really create is debt or imaginary money. It's up to people to step up and create business. How are we to get that education? How can people learn how to be successful in business?
Well, unfortunately, and I had to, and I'm just using myself as an example. Unfortunately, there was no school at the time teaching me how to be successful in business. And I remember taking an accounting course in high school, and I took some accounting classes in college. However, that was not enough to teach me how to run a successful business. So, in my opinion, there's very few places to teach people how to be successful, as an entrepreneur. And I know some schools are starting to address that. I believe there needs to be a need for that, and obviously it goes back to the people. For me personally, I've learned the hard way and I've learned the good way by trial and error. And most people, if they go down that path, they're going to fail. So how do we do it? We got to have more education on those types of how to teach people how to be successful. Let's give some incentives to do that, and it is up to the people. Now, I personally work with thousands of entrepreneurs, and one of the things that I'm doing is I teach people how to be successful as a home-based business, and it's also very easy to get into, and it's a very low entry point, and so the risk is very small. Unlike some of these businesses where you spend millions of dollars, and I've been there, spend millions of dollars and hope that in the next 3 to 5 years that you make that money back, and you may or may not. Where a lot of businesses, small businesses, you start for $1,000, and so. I have a website, which is my personal website. Anybody that's listening can go to, and it's Simply G. The letter G is in golf, simplyg.net. And if they're interested and want to know more about how they can be an entrepreneur, they can go there, and I can help point them in the right direction.
The hot topic, and you heard me discussing it before you came on the show. How are we going to reduce our country's debt? What can we do? We have politicians beating each other up, making, empty promises to us. What do you see we could do to reduce the country's debt?
Well, one is the Congress has to quit the ongoing spending that's, just putting us further and further in debt. The other thing is giving incentives to be an entrepreneur and a small business owner, and then it goes back to the people. And there is still the power of the people. We are still we the people, and we can dictate change. And if anybody that's listening that's been aware of any laws that have happened, like how did that law get passed? A lot of times those laws are from a very small select group. So the power of the people still exists, and the power of the people still has the purchasing power. So whatever is being produced, whether it's overseas or within the U.S., is being bought within the U.S. with the people. So the people can stand up and say, hey, here's what we need to do, enough's enough. Well, we have to start and invoking that change now, or it's going to get a lot uglier.
Well, and I brought up earlier that, in 2006, our own president, then a senator, was talking about refusing to raise the debt ceiling, that there was no need to raise the debt ceiling. At that point, he thought cutting costs, cutting spending. Do you think there's a need? Because right now they're all telling us if we don't raise the debt ceiling, we're going to default we owe all this to China, Japan. Bernanke's warning us. Geithner's warning us. Do you think there's a need to raise the debt ceiling?
Well, I'm going to give you two answers. One is, I believe with the way we're at right now, without having a solid plan on how we're going to be successful without raising the limit, then they have to raise it. I'm totally against them raising it because, okay, here we go again. So, enough's enough. However, I believe we have to have a solid plan. How are we going to invoke the change and be successful? But the thing is how many of these companies that we've seen in the last 5 years, they've gone under, and you talked about some of them, and they've been bailed out. Who's going to bail us out?
Nobody.
And there's going to have, nobody. So there has to be some pain somewhere. So where do we draw that line? So we really have to draw that line, and the people need to push. Say, enough's enough. And then the other thing is, the power of vote. There was a big change, back in November. I believe next year is a key election year. So those are some factors that have to happen. But to answer your question, we've got to stop it at some point, and the sooner the better.
Well, and it's really scary. We need somebody, and maybe it's going to have to be the American people. We need to draw that line in the sand and say, enough's enough. No more debt ceiling being raised. We've raised it, so many times in the last, 10, 15 years that our debt has more than tripled. And we cannot afford to keep doing it. They would not allow American people to go out there and do what they're doing. What's good for the goose should be good for the gander. We should not be allowing our government to spend money that isn't there. And in doing so, they're promising that our children and our grandchildren are going to step up and pay this debt. So, in a way, they're making us slaves to debt. They're turning us into the product that is securing, the collateral that's securing these loans. They've made you and me and everybody else out there co-signers on a debt, and our debt-to-income ratio could not afford that. It's getting really scary out there with what's going on. We're going to take another quick break, G. We'll be back with G. Reynolds after this break.
Buy Back America Radio. Unifying patriots everywhere against the evil trying to destroy America's freedom. Now, here's your host, Tim Aalders.
Need to strengthen the home-based business, the small mom-and-pop shops, right, G?
Well, most definitely, and that's a great analogy of what you just shared. It's a chain reaction, and a lot of people don't see how it is a chain reaction. And in my opinion, you have to take care of the small business owner, the small entrepreneurial businesses, give them the incentives, and then the big companies, and let's use Walmart as an example, is that you've got to say, look, you're going to pay more of a tax base or don't come here. Now, the fear is that they're afraid that if they don't come here, they're going to lose jobs, and it's going to end up being 50% vacancy like in some of the examples you have given. However, it's the opposite. And so there's going to be an accountability, and we got to get back to the basics. And your video on your website is a great video. And Rob, the caller made some great points. Is that video is very educational and it's very enlightening. And even it was eye-opening for me, and I know a lot of those things. And I would recommend sending that video virally for everybody that you know, because the facts are the facts. And a lot of times people aren't informed of the facts, and by having the facts, they can make an educated decision.
Well, and it's true. And what people don't realize is I've been an executive at these big box stores. And the big box stores can sure offer you some savings at the start, but when there's no longer any competition, and people are starting to see it in the Walmarts as their prices has gone up 15%, is once the competition's gone, they can charge what they want because they're the only game left in town. And they are greedy as a corporation. They are going to go for your last dollar, your last dime, because that's how they got their billions in the first place. So, they get the tax credits, the tax break, but it's you that votes. You might save that buck. You might save that little bit of money on the start, but it's going to come back and haunt you, because once the small businesses are gone and there's no competition and you've lost that tax base in your community, They're going to raise your taxes. You're going to be paying more. You know, G, unfortunately, we're running out of time here. You've been a great guest. Thank you. Your simplyg.net is where they can go. Thanks so much for being a guest.
Well, thank you, and thanks for having me. I look forward to being on future shows.
All right,
G.
you take care.